Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hey there. I've got a special treat for you this week. It's neither my usual long-form conversation nor my temporary method of recording remotely during a pandemic conversation. This is a group Zoom call that I did with some of my tour people. These are folks, mostly women, and on this call, one lone male who have either been on a tour with me or are scheduled to be on a tour in the future. I wanted to make myself available to them to answer any questions that they might have, either about WanderTours, my tour company, about upcoming tours that we're offering, and then just let them have a chance to talk about travel in general, because I know that there are so many open-ended questions out there. There were nearly 40 of us on this call, and we spent more than an hour and a half on it, which was really a lot of fun. What I did for this podcast episode was extract some of the Q&As and kind of stitch them together. And it's a combination of questions that had been sent to me in advance and also questions that came up spontaneously from people on the call. Forgive the audio. You're going to hear some background noises in some cases and the audio kind of dropping in and out. So just be forgiving of that and know that in advance. One thing that you might notice when you listen to this is that there are just as many things that I don't know compared to the things that I do know right now. And that is really just the nature of what's going on in the world. But I think the value here is in the questions that people are asking, because you might be asking the same questions yourself. And they include questions about the future of travel and flights, questions about whether tour companies, hotels, and activities are going to be able to actually weather this crisis. And also, there were lots of questions about travel insurance. Now, for reference, this was recorded on April 23rd. Things are changing constantly. So if you hear something and you feel like it may be a little bit out of date, forgive. This is already 2 weeks old. I held a second Zoom call this past week, also with past and current tour people. I may post that in the next couple of weeks or so. I've got some other things lined up that I want you to hear over the next 2 weeks. But if you are interested in getting in on a Zoom call with me, I'm going to schedule one that will be more for my community at large, so the bigger community. So you don't have to have taken a tour with me to be included on that future one. Just send me a note at beth@shesboldpodcast.com and let me know you're interested, and I'll get you the details for that. Now, before I get to today's episode, I want to give a big, huge shout out to two new Patreon supporters. Sherry joined us from Hawaii. Yay, Hawaii. And Laura joined our community from here in Seattle. Also, yay. But kind of bigger yay for Hawaii because, I am so grateful for each and every one of my Patreon supporters. Frankly, it's a small community, but what it tells me is that these folks get the value of bringing these conversations to the world. Of course, normally for these episodes, I'm talking with women who are doing incredibly bold things. And I think these stories just don't get enough attention. So I want to give these ladies a platform to share their stories. So the support that I get from the Patreon community is invaluable to me because these folks are stepping up and telling me that the mission of the show is important to them. They know the value of sharing these stories from these women. And I get it if you're not in a financial position to do so. I do understand that. But if you are, you can do so for as little as $2 a month. Now, you may not think that's valuable to me or worth the trouble, but believe me, I'm sitting here in my office recording these episodes all by my lonesome. And without the kind of support from you all, I just don't know what kind of value I'm providing. So let me know through that Patreon community. I really appreciate it. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/bebold. And if you'd prefer to make a one-time donation, you can do that too. You can do it via Venmo or PayPal. And that information is all on the Patreon page, or you can just hit me up directly and I can send you that information. Okay, that's enough of a pitch today. Let's get on with this episode. Please enjoy this Q&A that is all about travel.
I know that for your company that things are good for you, but what about these other places that there have been so many cancellations, and will these places continue to operate once this is said and done?
Yeah.
And it's probably a question that cannot be answered right now.
Well, you know what? I can actually, I think a solid answer is difficult to give you, but I can give you kind of a general answer for it. So for one, it's going to depend on the company, and it's going to depend on how they handle their finances. So I know I've got a very good friend here who runs a pretty big travel company, and by big, I'm saying he's probably got, they probably deal with more than, I'm going to guess 300 to 500 people a year. So it's like a medium-sized company. And they have been able to move almost all of their tour people to 2021. They made a decision, I'm fairly certain, they made a decision to just move all of their 2020 tours to 2021. And all but a handful of people, and we're talking like 3 people, have rebooked, and they're doing the tour in 2021. So they're smart business people. They've been in business for a long time, and that is going to be great for them. They're going to be able to just move that business forward. There are other companies that, one, they don't manage their money quite as well. That's one part of it. But then I have a number of friends, because we're in the Pacific Northwest, who have outdoor industry companies that rely on summer business. And so what's happened for them is, let's say a lot of their clients come from out of state, are planning to come from out of state this summer. They've paid for their trip, and in turn, that company paid their operators around let's say the national parks, or around different places. So they don't have money in the bank. And then those people have canceled their trips. They don't want to come to Seattle in the summertime, and they want their money back, because now they don't know when they're going to come back to Seattle, but that money is gone. Those kinds of companies may be out of business because they can't recover from that kind of a loss. But it depends on maybe a stimulus package, if they're, depending on the size of it, if they're able to get loans, loans that they don't have to pay back, float them for that. Yeah, I think it's just going to depend on the company. It's going to depend on how they manage their finances, and really what kind of position they're in. So for the big companies, like I would imagine, like the Gate ones and the Rick Steves and, and Taux, like the big companies, I imagine that they've got money in reserve, and that they are figuring out, how to move forward. Those big companies aren't going to pay well. So, it could be that like the medium-sized companies that, again, that have a lot of summer business are probably going to be the ones that'll fare the worst in this. So is that helpful?
It is. I'm thinking more like, say, like a hotel, because we've had hotels already start to close in Boston because of this, and restaurants. And like there's a hotel in Boston that's been around for over 100 years that has closed its doors. And I'm thinking of Hotel Buckminster, Karen, in North Square.
Right.
And so places like that are not going to be able to sustain this economic, because it's not just United States. This is so global. And I know that other countries will fare better either because they were able to contain it quicker and, in their financial reserves. And it's just probably a wait and see avenue right now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the interesting thing is that I thought, like in the beginning of this, I thought, oh gosh, I've got some downtime. I can work on tours for 2021. And I was looking at the New Orleans, Santa Fe, and Seattle culinary tours and started working on those. And what I found out was all the businesses had closed down. So some of them went out of business. They just like the Ride the Ducks, which some of you were on here in Seattle. Ride the Ducks closed down permanently. And then I haven't been able to get answers for like the hotels, because the hotels right now are closed temporarily.
Right.
I thought, oh, I've got this time. I can work on the future. And then I just haven't been able to get answers from people. So, and then the fact is that even if I can get answers, it goes back to Beth Also's question. It's like, are they going to be in business, in a year? And it's an unknown. So I think there's going to have to be, even with my future tours, there's going to have to be some flexibility in terms of the itinerary, because we don't know what the landscape's going to look like in another year. Right. So Kim, she's on the call, had asked a few questions that I want to address. And I talked about this a little bit in the beginning. She said she's interested in my thoughts on when will be responsible to travel to developing countries once travel opens up. And she said, I would hate to think my travel might risk bringing the virus to a country with limited health care. And I think that is such an important question to ask, because I know a lot of us do travel to developing countries where the healthcare system might not be so great. I guess my short answer is time will tell. Like now is not the time for sure to be going to these places. And it's just difficult to tell when will be appropriate. As we get information, like I said, that's coming out every day, I know that new kind of testing is coming to see if people have been infected and therefore won't be infected again or won't pass it on to people. I think, who knows, there may be some technology involved that will allow us to be able to travel to places a little bit more quickly than we're thinking about it today. So I wanted to address the question, but then also say I don't really have an answer for it. I didn't want to just ignore it. It's something that is on my mind, and it is something that, as I said, I have a weekly call with colleagues of mine who are also tour operators. So in the travel industry, many of them are in the adventure space. Some of them are in the outdoor industry, as I mentioned. But we're having weekly calls to talk about exactly these things and to discuss them. So it's something that I've got, that I'm on top of. I just don't have an answer for it right now. Someone else had asked, I'm going to pop, I think it was another Kim too, who asked a question, because I think this ties into it. Would evacuation insurance typically cover returning travelers home during a global pandemic? I bring that up because there are countries where you wouldn't want to be stuck. I think there's two parts to that question, or two parts to the answer. And one is, if you were sick, your evacuation insurance would probably get you out of the country, because that's what evacuation insurance is for. So it's for, if you're ill, you get injured, you can get yourself out of the country to the nearest hospital or facility where you can be taken care of. I do not think evacuation insurance, if people were stuck in Morocco, for example, and needed to get out, I don't think evacuation insurance would help you with that. There were probably, I don't know, does anybody know anyone, or were you stuck in a country where you had to get out?
I actually know someone who's in Jamaica right now from Canada, and now Jamaica, I believe, has shut down their borders, so they can't get out until at least June. So they're just hanging tight and hanging out, and hopefully they can come home when
We've got some of our UK citizens stuck in Peru as well.
They still haven't gotten them out?
No, they've got some of them out, but there's also several people that are too far away to get to the airport, so they're having to basically hunker down in a hostel.
Okay. And Heather, why can't your friend get out of Jamaica?
She actually originally she got married there, and now they've shut down the borders. But she's kind of one of those people that just goes with the flow, and she doesn't seem worried about it. But I do know that they are taking precautions down in Jamaica, and that they are doing quarantines and everything like that.
So they won't even let her out?
As far as I know, yeah.
There's probably no flights.
Yeah,
the whole Caribbean is shut down. Flights have stopped. Even sailing, people are stuck on their sailboats because they can't get out.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Molly, you have a question?
I have, two things. One is I have a friend who was stranded in rural India, and working with the State Department, they were finally able to arrange for a number of expats to meet at a certain location. They got them travel permission to get to a spot where they could get on a bus together, then to go to New Delhi, but she had to sign a promissory note for a one-way flight for $2,500 back to the States.
Wow.
That was the only, because the flights are closed, so it had to be through the governments. And then in Costa Rica, right now, they've just had an expat flight arranged by United Airlines from San Jose to Houston, and it was directly through United, but they had 2 dates, one a week, and it was $1,400 to book, and they were sold out because they had that clearance window. But other than that, the borders are closed. So people are really sick right now.
Similar thing happening here.
So I think your evacuation insurance is pretty much not going to help you out in the case of something like this and an emergency like this. I will say, just in terms of travel insurance, is that policies are changing frequently. And if you bought, like, I buy a year-long policy, right? And I actually haven't looked at mine, but I buy a year-long policy through MedJet. And I will bet you anything that if I printed out that policy and I compared it to what they're offering now, it would look very different. And I know that companies are I won't say that it's MedJet because I have no idea, but I know that some companies are just being unscrupulous and not honoring what was in their contract, or in their paperwork 6 months ago, because they're trying to stay afloat themselves. They're trying to figure out how they can still run their business and not have all these payouts.
I just have a quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
With experience that I've had recently and with friends, is when the government says the border is going to be closed in 48 hours, get yourself out if you're going to get out.
Yep.
Listen, you got to not just, when you travel, you have to be in contact a little bit with what's going on in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, too, is that once you get back, because I know people who have had to be quarantined in Canada and then also here in the U.S. So they've had to self-quarantine for a couple of weeks for 14 days.
Right.
Once they get back from a country. I have a friend who came back from India and he had to self-quarantine in his apartment. Or it was a hotel. He got stuck in a hotel for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of funny. I had one person ask, if you had a crystal ball, when do you think the global travel advisory will be lifted? And the global travel advisories, the U.S. government has said, do not travel. It's like level 4, do not travel to any other country. And then someone else said, lacking a crystal ball, it's impossible to answer all the questions. So everybody's got crystal balls on their mind, which I thought was really funny. But yeah, I don't know. The global travel advisory is really difficult. If my spidey sense would be that it would open up by country, that it's not going to be a global lift, like it's a global shutdown, right? But I don't think that it's going to be a global lift. I think they might say it's safe to travel to Ireland, but it may not be safe to travel to Thailand or some other place, or maybe a region that has had, or to Italy where they've had more infections. And then, of course, it's going to depend on the airlines. I think airlines are running at a 20% capacity right now, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll follow up. I've got some great links and websites for you to kind of read that you may want to just kind of keep your eye on. There is a website, I think Forbes is keeping this website, where it has all of the airlines' information and kind of what their policies are and what their policy changes are. And they're updating it like every day or every other day or so. But I think a lot of the airlines are now working at about a 20% capacity. So if you can get a flight, like I have a flight to New Jersey at the end of May, it got changed. Delta changed the flight. And when I looked at the options, there's now only 2 options, like 2 flights that are flying from Seattle to, I'll be flying into JFK. There's only 2 flights that are going at this point. So there's just a lot of limited options. And I have no idea if that trip is even going to happen, if those flights will even happen. So we'll have to see. So Robin actually asked, she's interested to know how the travel industry will determine if and when travel can begin again. And what do people think about kind of this second wave of the virus?
Yeah.
And I think that ties in a little bit to what I was just saying is like the crystal ball, we just don't know. And, you know, I have seen some reports that they're expecting a second wave, you know, in the fall, but it's too hard to tell at this point. You know, you just don't know. You know, my honest answer and kind of what I am doing personally is it's a wait and see. So I have flights that I booked, it was either late February or early March for June, like before everything just really kind of crashed. So I have flights to New Jersey and to Mongolia in late May and early June. Now I have trips that I'm supposed to take in August, September, October, November, and December. And I don't have any of those booked. For me, it's a wait and see at this point. I'm okay with kind of holding back on booking and risking maybe fewer options or a little bit higher flight cost, but because we just don't know what's going to happen at that point. And honestly, like if you're on a tour with me that's scheduled for that time period, like for either Papua New Guinea or Morocco, even in the early part of next year, I would just say hold off on booking your flights at this point.
Too late.
It's okay.
Too late.
No, I know a number of people already have their flights booked. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, because airlines are being quite liberal with their policies in terms of changes.
I'm not concerned about the flight. I cancel that or.
So, Wendy, is that, if you don't mind me just kind of calling you out because you went like this, what's your concern around that? Are you concerned because I'm suggesting that the tour might not happen, or are you concerned because you might be out that money because you don't know what's going to happen with the airline?
My concern is that I'll be out that money. I haven't even picked up a trip insurance. I haven't done that because I've been afraid. I don't know whether to get my insurance. I don't even know if it's too late to get my trip insurance now with all this happening.
Yep. So I know you had asked me that in a question. I was going to get to that. Usually you have to buy travel insurance shortly after you book your trip, your tour, or your flight. We are under, extenuating circumstances here. And what airline are you flying?
Air Morocco.
I don't know anything about Air Morocco, kind of about their policies. I'm just more familiar with the Delta. But my sense is that they are going to be liberal about their changes for flights. So, change fees are, in the scheme of things, change fees are pretty minor when it comes to the cost of a trip. So I think your other question was, when will I make a decision to cancel the trip? And I don't have an answer for you on that right now. And is postponing it to another date an option? Absolutely. It's just as I mentioned to you, my friends who've got hundreds of people that they're working with. I'm fortunate in one way that I don't have hundreds of you. My friends who have hundreds of people that they're having to rebook, they've just shifted it to the next year. And that's exactly what we would do, is we would just shift, the tours until we know that it's a good solid time to travel.
My concern is the second wave. Yeah. I mean, we're in uncharted waters here. We don't know what's going on, but the CDC, the WHO, they're basing a lot of their predictions on the 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic. Okay, and they're trying to get a sense of what's going to happen, what could possibly happen with this pandemic. And the 1918 pandemic had, I believe it was 3 waves that came. Things quieted down, businesses opened up, and then we got hit again. Mm-hmm. And my fear is that things will quiet down. I mean, it's not a fear. I hope things do quiet down. I hope things do return to normal. But that after things return to normal, we'll get hit with a second wave.
Right. Well, I will say this. Well, things will not return to normal. We have more knowledge. We have more knowledge than we did 100 years ago. So things will not return to normal. So what will be normal will be for people to be wearing masks out in public, to be extending the social distancing when you go into
no handshaking.
Yeah, no handshaking, no kissing, in public, that kind of thing, your friends. And, restaurants may continue to struggle with either limited sit-down service or no sit-down service, and they'll continue with their takeout service. And what that's going to do is that's going to help stave off a bigger second wave. And so I think we're just going to have a new normal that's just going to be different. And because we have different ways of testing than they did back, again, 100 years ago, we're going to be able to do early detection once we get our shit together, pardon my French. Once we get that all together, we are going to be able to do more testing. We're going to be able to understand things much more quickly than they did 100 years ago, whether it's through temperature taking, whether it's through pulse oximeter, testing, whether it's through antibodies. We've just got so much more at our disposal than we did, and that's going to be super helpful.
Are they doing tracking apps in the United States?
No. There are tracking apps here. I'm not super familiar with it. I've got somebody just posted on my Facebook page yesterday, I think 2 tracking apps that are available. At least one is here in the Seattle area that they're using, and I don't have a lot of information about that. But there's, if you're on Facebook, you can look at one of my most recent posts. I think it was my rant that I just posted yesterday morning. Someone in the comments actually put some information in there about the tracking apps on there.
I was going to say, this is two things I was going to say, going back to, the second wave. There was something on the news saying there was the concern about the second wave in the fall because you might have, the pandemic, the virus coming around, but also you have the flu. So you have both coming back, and people are not sure, do I have the flu, do I have coronavirus, and whether people are going to be lax. So that's one thing. But going back to the comment about the airlines, what I've been hearing, and how true it is, I'm not sure, it seems like as long as you don't want a refund from the airlines, you're okay. But if you want to change, they're waiving change fees and whatnot. So changing your dates, but trying to get money back from airlines seems to be the harder thing. So change fees are fine. So that's why I'm saying I've got my flight right now. If I got to change it without getting a change fee, fine. But anyway, so I think they're trying to work with everyone, but getting the refund from the larger airlines will be a hassle.
Well, for Delta, what they have done for me is they gave me a credit, the full amount of my flight with no change fee, and I can just use that for a future flight. And I fly enough Delta that it's not a big deal for me, but at least no change fee in terms of that. So, but yeah, something to be aware of, with the airlines. And like I said, things are changing so much. They're coming out with new policies pretty frequently. I will, like I said, I'll make sure that I send you this Forbes article. I actually linked to it in my newsletter that went out yesterday, but I'll send it to everybody who's been on the call just so you have that, because it's a really good, solid resource for what the airlines are doing pretty much on a daily basis.
May I interject something here related to the 1918 pandemic and what you just said, Beth, about more knowledge now? A lot of this does not operate on a knowledge level, as you well know, in the U.S. And Beth, also, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you look at the history of the 1918 and where they flattened the curves and where they didn't, a lot of that was like the same stuff that's going on now. Some areas open early and go back to the beach, and some areas continue to be rigorous, maintaining masks and social distancing. So, we weren't apparently in 1918 behaving in a cohesive way, and certainly we're not now. So I think this feeds into my worry about this whole second wave.
Everyone has to do for themselves. You do you.
We might not survive, but the planet will carry on.
I'm going to go on to a couple of other questions here. Joe had asked if I'm going to be running any culinary tours in other U.S. cities. So some of you may know that I have been regularly, although I've taken a couple of years off, I regularly run tours to Seattle, Santa Fe, and New Orleans as culinary tours. And my plan, and I have the dates for the tours, I actually have the New Orleans trip on the website. It's not really hidden, but it's not super obvious. I do have plans for 2021 to do those 3 culinary tours. The trick, as I said earlier, is just getting information from my destinations, because the hotels are shut down at this point, and as well as some of the other businesses. Yeah, certainly one of the things that I'm thinking about for 2021 is to create more domestic tours, so that people can either drive to the destination and they don't have to worry about flying, or they just don't have to worry about going to another country. So I've thought about that. It's something that I am actively exploring, perhaps some outdoor types of trips if people want to do some light hiking, maybe in the Pacific Northwest. Is that Jan raising your hand? Yeah. Do you want to do a horsey trip? Should we?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Out back. Yeah. Packing.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I'm looking at options to do something some trips that are more domestic. I don't know if anybody on here would be interested, but I'm actually working with a running coach who trains people from couch to 5K. And so we're looking at the possibility of putting together like a destination trip where you could run like a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, or a marathon at the destination. So those are the kinds of things. And that would be in the U.S. Might be Hawaii, but it would be in the U.S. So
Alaska's in the U.S.
There's other options that I'm looking at that might get us outdoors more, and domestic trips. So good question there, Joe.
Will that be open to your token Brit, Beth?
Of course. Could we get you to Hawaii?
Bloody right.
Okay.
What? Give me back the paddle.
Great. I did have one person ask, and this was something that I wasn't fully up to speed on, so it was kind of a good lesson for me. The U.S. currently has suspended all visas for non-citizens for travel to the U.S. Thoughts on when they might start issuing visas again? And she was specifically asking about non-immigrant visas. And I know just in this past week, there's been more information coming out about that. I know nurses and healthcare workers are trying to get into the U.S. and they can't get in, which is tragedy upon tragedy. But I actually didn't realize that visas were absolutely suspended for coming into the U.S. I thought it was just that the embassies had been shut down and that people couldn't get in-person interviews for it. But apparently they're just not issuing visas. It's really hard to tell. Like, this is a great excuse for not letting people into the country. Yeah. So it's really difficult to know, when things might change. Teresa's just feeding me something here about, is it too late to get travel insurance? Generally, you do have to get travel insurance right after you book. Like, you have a short window, like maybe a week or 2 weeks time to get travel insurance after you've booked a tour or a trip or your flights. Oftentimes, your flights will give you the option to actually tack on travel insurance to that. The only thing that I can suggest is to talk to a travel insurance provider and find out if it's too late. It probably is, given the circumstances. There's probably not a lot of wiggle room right now. But the fact that if it is just your flights that you're concerned about, I think that there's a really good chance that you can get credited. Probably not a refund, but you can get credited or be able to move your flights to a future date with no problem.
Beth, I usually get travel insurance. I guess I've gotten it about 5 times in the past 4 years. And it may be because of my personal situation, being an American who lives outside the U.S. and being over 65 years old, travel insurance for me is evacuation medical insurance. In other words, if the tour is canceled, I'm not covered. So you need to investigate it thoroughly. It may not be such a great thing that you are hoping it to be, but at the same time, my travel insurance runs about $65, $75 a trip. But cancellation or anything like that is not covered.
Right. What company do you use? Do you know offhand?
Oh, it's a Japanese company. There's a website that's kind of famous for travel insurance.
Mine covers that. Mine covers cancellations.
Yeah, I haven't been able to do that.
Well, Alan, would you do me a favor and just follow up in an email and send that, send me the information and I'll pass that out to everybody?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have you actually had to use that?
No.
That's the tricky thing, is that I bought travel insurance once for flights because it seemed like, I was like, oh, this isn't much of an add-on onto this trip. And it turns out that the flights got canceled or changed to a point where I couldn't use them because I needed to arrive at the destination before my tour group, and the flights got changed. So I was going to be arriving after the tour group. And it turns out that insurance didn't even cover that. Mm-hmm. So, it seems like for me, it seemed like a great thing. Like, oh yeah, I'll tack on, 30 extra bucks, onto this. And that was the last time I ever did that. So I think it's, I think like the devil's in the details with a lot of that stuff. And it's kind of like, I use MedJet for my evacuation insurance, and they've been great because I've never had to use them.
Right.
When it comes down to it, I mean, I've heard great things about them anecdotally, but when it comes down to it, I don't have any personal experience, except they're really nice salespeople. They have a great system, online for buying the insurance, or me upping my renewal every year. It's been great, and I've heard good things about them, but I just don't have that personal experience. Thank goodness for it.
My travel insurance comes with my banking, HSBC, and I've had a couple of occasions where I've had to cancel. They've been brilliant. They covered everything.
I've read a lot, and what I understand is that most insurance, even I'm supposed to be in Costa Rica right now. I'm not. I'm in Missouri. But the travel insurance won't cover the pandemic, even if your flights are canceled, even if the country's not allowing. If you're sick, it will cover you. But if you have the virus, it will cover you. But it won't cover for a lot of other reasons.
For fear, like I just got an alert from Allianz, which is a company that we actually recommend. Teresa and I will send out links for Allianz, but they just updated their terms of service and they used the word pandemic in there. Probably for the first time, and they said we will not cover in the case of a pandemic or fear of travel. So if you just have a fear that you don't want to go somewhere.
Or even in the case of, say, Morocco, even though it's not your personal fear, if the trip is canceled because you don't know, if the tour is canceled because of a lot of unknowns, I don't think they'll cancel you. And that's who I have as Alliance.
Yeah, my travel insurance will pay if like our foreign office, if on the website the foreign office says you do not travel, then they will cover you. Because if you don't want to travel and they say you cannot, you cannot travel to that company, that country, that they will pay.
Jane, would you just adopt us and put us on your policy?
Yeah, that would be great.
Come and live with me.
I'm not worried about the travel insurance, and I am less concerned now that I know that Beth, that you won't be taking the last payment. You're going to make a decision about whether to move. But what I am concerned about as far as travel insurance is evacuation, which I guess is separate, but also medical.
Yeah.
And if it's
Yeah. So that is that, like as Jane said, it's like if there's, or someone had said, I think maybe Kim, if there is a medical reason, you can use your insurance. But it's that fear, it's the unknowing. You changed your mind. They won't honor it for that reason. But if for medical evacuation or for I don't know about travel insurance specifically, but if you are ill, that's a whole different story.
Well, it's interesting that they'll cover for a physical, but they won't cover for a mental. It's the fear. Anxiety, that's a whole other issue.
That's an interesting point, because it's harder to prove, right?
Right.
The other thing,
insurances for anything will have wriggle room, won't they? They'll find a clause. I heard ages ago that there are some big insurance companies that have a whole department that will go through your policy and find that little part that will stop them paying you.
Right.
Go through it.
I believe it.
Yeah.
in regards to the travel insurance, the medical evacuation, you also are covered for medical expenses in country.
Yes.
Including pre-existing conditions.
Providing you've told them that you've got those conditions.
Yeah, but they're always finding out and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, but you when you sign up for the insurance, you tell them everything.
When you submit a claim for diabetic coma, and then they find out that you had diabetes to begin with,
but if you didn't tell them, then that's down to you.
No, when you submit the claim, though.
A couple of people have added the insurance in the chat window. They've added the insurance that they use. Julie uses Travel Guard. She said she used it for an injury and they were great. And then Annie said that she uses Ripcord travel insurance. Loved World Nomads, but they won't cover past.
Yeah.
Should we tell them how old, Annie? They won't cover past a certain age. So Ripcord and then World Nomads if you're under a certain age.
Beth?
Yeah.
I went on insuremytrip.com.
Perfect. Yep, great.
And the company that carried the plan in all cases was Tokyo Marine HCC Medical Insurance Atlas International.
Okay, great to know.
I'll confirm that in an email to you that you can share with everyone else.
Okay. Super. Yeah, Insure My Trip is something that Teresa and I send out to people as a recommendation. We partner with those folks in Allianz just because there's good information. They're good folks to work with. Thank you all so much for being here. I can't tell you, really, it means a lot to me. I like to have this community. So thanks for being in my life.
We feel fortunate also.
Let's do this again.
Let's do it again. Did you enjoy that? For me, it was a lot of fun to be connected with so many people and have them featured here. As I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to join in on a Zoom call in the future to talk about travel or anything else, just let me know by sending an email to beth@shesboldpodcast.com. If you would like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing the uplifting stories from my guests, go to patreon.com/bebold. Patreon supporters get to submit questions for me to ask guests and become part of our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. They also get access to bonus content, including questions I ask of the guest. Other ways to support the show? Leave feedback on whatever podcast app you're using to listen to these episodes. You can make sure you're subscribed. That actually helps the show get higher rankings in search results. So that is super important. Make sure you're subscribed. And also share these episodes with friends. The number one way people find out about podcasts is word of mouth. Many people have a little extra time on their hands these days. Show them the light and introduce them to podcasts, especially this one, right? To keep up with me and all of my travels when I'm traveling and also my running adventures, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at both Beth Whitwa and WanderGal. Feel free to leave a message or question at 877-280-5170. I do love the feedback. So you can leave a message or a question. You can also email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. Ladies, don't forget to join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group. There you are going to find support, and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.